Hey everyone, how you doing today? It's actually Friday morning, but we wanted to make sure we did this for you. We've got Anna Kelly here for you. How you doing, Anna?
I'm great today. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for giving us some time. I know you're very, very busy, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
So what I thought we would do in our first episode today is just kind of run down this $1.9 trillion. It's a proposal, right? It's not law. It's not even been voted on yet. But we have a new administration coming in next week, and this is kind of a day one thing for him. So let me run through it, and then we can just talk about the different parts, if you don't mind.
Great.
So the first thing that comes out of it is they're going to take the $600 kind of as a down payment for individuals. They're going to goose that up to a total of $2,000. I think that was Bernie Sanders' number. I was trying to figure out where the magic number of $2,000 came from, but it looks like that's where they want to take it. It will be somehow banded or focused. I'm not sure if it'll be the same way as last time, right? I think it was like if you make under 99K, you get it or something. So I'm sure that will be talked about. They're going to goose unemployment up an extra 100, right? The 900 billion we just passed took it to 300. They're going to take it to 4, so add 100. They're going to be extending it, I think, another 13 weeks. Also, interestingly enough, they want to bring the federal minimum wage to $15. That's interesting because I think the federal minimum today is $7.50, I think.
Yeah.
They're going to take the eviction and foreclosure moratoriums out to the end of September. They're going to give $350 billion to states. They're going to give $170 billion to, I guess, primary schools, K through 12, $50 billion for testing, $20 billion for vaccines, and an additional $30 billion for kind of rental assistance, kind of the small landlords, if you will. So that's kind of everything that I've seen in it. Again, the total is 1.9 trillion. I think it's a day one initiative. Anything in that jump out at you?
Well, the fact that they're extending the eviction moratorium and the forbearance to September 2021, we all know that nobody wants to be evicted at Christmas. So I anticipate they'll probably even extend that through the end of 2021 once we get there. But that's a long time. Landlords have already been about a year without being able to evict people who are not paying consistently, and many of which who could pay based on the extra money that they've gotten from unemployment, but are just choosing not to. So I think there's going to be a lot of pain for landlords. And with all of the other changes and fears going on and potential tax code changes and this forbearance now going out indefinitely, there are a lot of landlords who are really going to be hurting if they're not investing in the right asset class and type. So, that's a negative. It really is. Although I know they're trying to help people. When you give so much extra unemployment per week, people can afford to pay rent. When you have CARES Act assistance, people can afford to pay rent. And so adding this, eviction moratorium is a blow to landlords. It really is.
Yeah, that was one thing that I never really understood because, I'm an accountant, so my brain may think differently than most folks. But when I look at an income statement, and yes, undoubtedly, we told people to stay home, you're not essential, blah, 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 sit on the couch. Well, that income statement has two parts. There's the income side, and then there's the expense side. So we've done an okay job of fixing the income side, certainly with the extra 400 if it comes through, and certainly with the 2K. So as long as the money is the same, why do we also tackle, for most people, their largest monthly expense, right? Which is rent and or a mortgage. And I'm like, no wonder the savings rate is so high. You've basically told everybody to save because you can't go do anything. And now you're frankly, now you're rewarding behavior, right? If I have a tenant that hasn't paid rent since March, and I'm sure they're going to extend it all the way out to the end of September, right? That'll be, 16 months. That's like $30,000.
Right. And those tenants don't have a net worth of even $30,000. So they don't care because they know that even if you try to go after them, they don't have any money to give you. And so, it's a real negative. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that forbearance is only for federally backed mortgages. So it's generally only for loans over $1 million where you're getting larger landlords, the mom and pop owners, which more than 50% of landlords in the country own less than 10 units.
Mm-hmm.
I think I read it was something like 70% of landlords own less than 10 units. And so they typically have a small bank mortgage and they don't get to have a forbearance. And so they really become at risk of losing their property if their tenants do not pay. And so it's very, very sad for
Yeah.
the small landlord that doesn't have the other liquidity to weather this storm. And even the CARES Act rent assistance, the tenant has to cooperate. Both the tenant and the landlord have to agree to apply for it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of gotcha clauses, as we've talked about before, one of which is, at least in the current CARES Act, they'll pay up to $750 per month. And oh, by the way, you can't go after the tenant for the difference. So if your rent is $1,000 or $1,500 a month, you're still going to take, maybe a 50% cut in the rent for that. And a lot of people don't realize that the average landlord, Michael, only profits 9 cents for every dollar that we take in, because the expenses are high when you factor in a mortgage and the taxes, the insurance, water, sewer, trash. In a lot of municipalities, average is 9 cents per dollar. So if you cut out, 50 cents, you're in the negative.
Yeah. And again, the landlords, or especially mom and pop landlords, have been asked to take so much on. Not only, so even if you had a forbearance, you still got to, I had a $6,000 AC go out on that one unit. That's something I had to eat. Oh, by the way, Gavin Newsom still wants his property tax money. Had to
And
do
that's
that.
going up.
Yeah, I had to do that twice, and now we'll have to do that at least one more time in the forbearance period. So, nobody's helping us is a takeaway. And really, what that goes down to is landlords, you have to be extra picky today when putting a new tenant in.
For sure. And you have to be very, very careful to have enough liquidity and reserves to really be able to weather these kind of storms. And if this pandemic has taught us anything, it's that.
Yeah.
Don't operate so lean and put so much into a property that, if somebody doesn't pay for a few months, you're hurting and you can't cover that expense.
Yeah. The other thing that was interesting to think about, I wanted to talk to you about, was the federal minimum wage. Right now it's $7.50, that doubling. That's going to be phased in, obviously, probably over 4 or 5 years. But what intuitively, what does that, how does that hit you? What do you think about that?
There's a couple of things. I think they're obviously using the pandemic to usher in what they've tried to accomplish for quite some time, but it is going to cause larger unemployment. Businesses are not going to be able to afford to pay as many people in those types of businesses. And smaller businesses, like think about Jack in the Box and McDonald's and Subway, or any of those kind of restaurants that have drive-through. I mean, your cost of a burger is going to go up extensively. If their labor costs double, then the cost of regular commodities that are selling are going to go up significantly. So it's going to cause price inflation on most things that require people to do a job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't get enough consumers to come in and purchase their products at those prices, they'll have to lay off people. And so jacking up employment costs 50% when you're already in an environment where you can't even have clients come into your business and they're already hurting because they just can't see the same number of people during this pandemic. It could be devastating to many, many small businesses. And it just is sad at the ripple effect that I think that's going to have.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a couple of things. And I think this is frankly, it's very similar to rent control in my mind, right? It sounds good on paper. You pull at the heartstrings, but when you see it in practice, in very short order, it hurts the exact people it's trying to help.
Exactly. And that's the point. It's not to say, oh, small businesses are more important than the people. But if small businesses can't keep you employed, you could have jobs that pay 15 an hour, but you might not ever get them because there's not enough jobs available that are willing to pay $15 an hour, that can afford to pay $15 an hour. And it's those kind of unskilled labor that need those jobs. And those are the very jobs that are going to be hit the hardest and unable to keep people employed.
Yeah, and then there's a couple of other things that kind of hit my mind. First and foremost, you take it up high enough, just to use Jack in the Box, to use your example, pretty soon you're not going to have an individual behind there. It'll just be an automation assembly line of, robots may be the wrong word, but automation.
Uh-huh.
And you just, you go up to a menu, you push a little button, you wait, and 20 minutes, 15 minutes later, it comes out on an assembly line. No people involved, right? Maybe there's one person kind of managing the overall thing, but so that's one thing I think about. And the other thing as a real estate investor I think about is, okay, right? Go to a state where it's 750 and you take it to 15. And let's just say it's 4 years from now. I'm like, you know what? Rents are going up,
Yes, they are. Yes,
right?
they are.
Right.
Because it takes away some of the, so one of the things that the government's looking to do is tackle the affordability problem of housing.
Hmm.
And so what you have to be real careful about is, will the federal government ever place rent caps? We've never seen that. It's always been a state level decision, or sometimes big cities will make those rent cap decisions. But until the federal government has a federal rent cap mandate, you've now increased the income,
Hmm.
doubled the income of a lot of people, and therefore they can't afford rent increases. And
Yep.
your landlords are also having to pay people more now, right?
Yeah, of
So
course. Yep.
people that we might be able to get to do very minor, clean up the grass and the leaves from your properties at $10 an hour. Now that cost is going up for landlords as well. So our costs are going to go up, in addition, and we're going to have to raise rent. So you want to be in conservative areas that don't have rent controls. Once you get to a place where you can't raise rents and taxes keep going up, rent controls is the real risk.
Yeah. Yeah. The other things in that, money for schools and testing and vaccines kind of feel like the
Right.
right things. I'm not going to argue the numbers. I don't have context. Um, but the other thing that he said in this presentation, which kind of made me shiver a little bit, is this is part one of a two-step process. He wants to come back in February, or at worst case March, and bring another trillion or multi-trillion dollar infrastructure bill to the table.
Yeah.
So, we're talking 10, 12% of GDP in more stimulus. And that's on top of 4.2 trillion last year.
Right.
It just,
So you've got all these things leading toward potentially mass inflation.
that's what I'm
You've
thinking.
got, you've got prices going up for goods because labor's going up. You've got a deflation. What people don't realize is inflation and pricing causes deflation of the dollar. So
Mhm.
it's an inverse relationship.
Mhm.
So you're printing all this money, which is going to devalue the dollar over time. And you've got price inflation, which devalues the value of a dollar over time. So, I think in the long run, you're kicking the can down the road, and it's going to be a big problem down the road.
Yeah, the hangover from this is going to be nasty. And one thing I get a lot in my comments is hyperinflation. Weimar Germany's coming. I don't see that. I don't see 100% inflation, a day, a month, a week, whatever. But yeah, I mean, we could have 4 or 5% inflation because of this for sure, I think.
Yeah. And the other thing is, not to go too off the US track, but the UN is already talking about, the Great Reset, which we've talked a little bit about,
Mhm.
of capitalism, but also national debt forgiveness. And so it wouldn't surprise me if all of this accumulated debt that we're borrowing from other places, or we're just printing it,
Hmm.
ends up at some point being wiped out, and that could change things. You just don't know how it's
Yeah.
going to play out. But the other thing to think about is, in periods of dollar devaluation and inflation of prices, owning assets is critical. So
Yeah.
having property, having assets that are going to continue to go up in value when everything else goes up in value, your rents go up, your value goes up,
Mhm.
is really, really important right now. So all these things that we don't like, that are a little scary, the legislative risks to being landlords, that can be offset by the fact that you own assets, and diversifying your assets is really important. Don't put them all in one asset type. Don't put them all in one location. Kind of
Mhm.
spread your risk around a little bit to different demographics. But I'm still excited to own property. None of these things are making me say, I'm out as a landlord. This is opportunity, because for those that can't weather the storm and for those that are just fearful and they can't see through, how do we navigate all of this? Those are the ones that are going to sell their properties, and those are the properties that I want to buy. Because as an investor, we always see something earth-shattering that we have to mitigate, right?
Yeah.
And this is just a new era of things that we have to think through, recognize the negatives, and then get creative about how do we mitigate that and compensate that for that and continue to move forward as investors.
Yeah, the one thing I want to add on to that is another reason why I'm excited about residential properties, and helping other people get residential properties, because the debt's fixed. Even though rates have ticked up a little bit here, if you can get something with a sub 4 30-year money, and if inflation ticks up to 2, 3, 4% in 3 or 4 years, you're going to start feeling really, really good, because the debt is fixed while rents go up, while your asset goes up.
Up to 10 properties though, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Well, yeah, given the current rules. But again, a lot of people that follow me, they're just trying to get their first or second. So if you're in that boat, go get your first 4, which is what I talk about. And after you get 4, if you like it, then go get 10. Because this
And
is a
even if
very
you
good time.
don't like it, go get 10, because you'll grow to value the things that make you think, I hate being a landlord. This is too hard. If it creates wealth for you and it creates financial freedom for you, was it really too hard? No. It's
Totally
kind of
agree.
like, working out. Like we talked about last week, I started the 75 hard program. Is it fun? No. I hate most minutes of my 2 45-minute workouts a day. I'm like, everything hurts. I'm out of breath. I want to get off this bike, But when you start seeing the results and you lose weight, it's like, okay, the pain was worth the reward.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Don't stop at 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 because there's pain, because you have a tenant you can't get out. All of this is just a little pain on the way to growth personally, grit that you will develop to help you get through those challenges that make you say, I hate it. And then ultimately financial freedom, which all these little headaches are well worth the beauty of what we create, right?
Yeah, there you go. We will leave episode 1 on that. Thank you very much, Anna.
You're welcome.